Hi guys, how are you doing? Okay, this is my review of the film Life Itself, which is a documentary about legendary, wonderful, incredible film critic Roger Ebert. Anybody who loves films knows who he is. He was really just a beloved celebrity, critic, person, household name. He became a household name. One of the few movie critics that probably everybody knew. He was just, had an incredible career, was an amazing man, and I thought this was this film was a very beautiful homage to him, his career, and his life. It was directed by Steve James, who did the documentary Hoop Dreams, which I remember was heavily championed by Roger Ebert. And I believe Siskel as well. I believe they both championed it, as you know, if you know Roger Ebert. He hosted a very popular movie review show called Siskel and Ebert with Gene Siskel, the film critic for the Chicago Tribune, and Roger Ebert worked for the Chicago Sun-Times. And I fondly remember watching probably every episode of that show. I ate it up. I loved it. It was just, I loved watching those two. So many people loved watching those two. They had such great chemistry together. I mean, they were like, you know, they could fight like cats and dogs, but when they agreed on a film, they were just, you know, completely in harmony with each other. And it was just wonderful to watch them talk film and how much they loved film and all that. So, anyway, Roger Ebert, as most of you probably know, passed away in, I believe it was 2013. He had gone through a grueling battle with cancer. I think he had been diagnosed with it, maybe like 5 to 10 years before, somewhere in that range. I can't remember exactly. But, he ended up having to have part of his jaw removed, or even his entire jaw removed, I think, at one point, so that he could not speak, he couldn't eat. This movie had a lot of, I mean, there were a lot of really beautiful scenes in this movie, but a lot of it was very hard to watch, because I'd say maybe a good quarter of the film consists of him in the hospital, him and his wife Chaz. It's really hard seeing him like that. I mean, his entire chin was gone, and he had a bandage, like, around his neck, and you could see it through his mouth. Like, it just went through his mouth to the other side of his neck. It was really extremely disfiguring, and it must have been, I can only imagine what he must have gone through. But anyway, a lot of the movie consists of him being in the hospital and undergoing treatment and all that, and he was so extremely ill. And the only way he could communicate was through his computer, which, do you guys remember Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist? It was the same thing. He communicated through a voice box or a computer, whatever. That's what he ended up having to do, because he could no longer speak. But even though he couldn't speak anymore, he definitely did not stop reviewing movies. As a matter of fact, they were saying in the movie that he did some of his best writing. Although, I mean, how can you quibble about his writing? The guy won a Pulitzer Prize. But they were saying that he did some of his best writing after he lost his ability to speak. I mean, he just put all his passion and his energy, even more so, into his blog where he reviewed movies. And, yeah. So Roger Ebert, I believe, he was definitely the first film critic to win a Pulitzer. He may have been the only film critic to ever win a Pulitzer Prize. I mean, this guy had an incredible career. He grew up in Illinois, in a suburb of Chicago, ended up going to the university there and being an editor for the paper. He was a newspaper guy. And, you know, a lot of the film talks about his early career where he was actually an alcoholic for quite a while. Like, a lot of people, seems like in the newspaper industry, and writers end up being alcoholics. They all hang out at the bar together, you know, which definitely that was one of his favorite things to do. Him and his buddies would all go to the bar, get, you know, wasted, and he'd wake up hangover after hangover. Finally, he decided he had had enough, and he went to AA, which is where he met his wife, Chaz. An interesting story. I actually saw those two at TIFF one year. We were in line for a movie at the Varsity Theater, which if you're a Torontonian will know it's at Yonge and Bloor, and he was like, when you're in the TIFF Film Festival lineups, they can get really, really long. You know, you can end up lining up for, you know, a good hour or so, and the line, especially the varsity, would snake all the way down these hallways and down the stairwell. Well, we were getting in the line, and I saw him there with his, I think she was only his fiancée at the time, Chaz, and they were holding hands, and they were just standing in line like anybody else. This guy was just, I think that's why he was so loved by so many people, because he was just such an everyman kind of guy. He was very approachable. He wasn't snobby. You know, he just seemed like a regular guy, you know, you could just go up and talk to. And I believe it was at that same theater, it had to be, it was at the same movie where I was sitting in my seat. They were in the row behind us. Chaz had gone to the bathroom, so he was sitting by himself, and some girl came over. I guess she was a university student or something, and she was like, "Oh, Mr. Ebert, I was wondering if I could just talk to you for a few minutes. I'm a film student or journalism student or whatever." And he said, "Sure, no problem." So she came right over, sat down beside him, and they were talking away, film, whatever, journalism. And then Chaz came back, and you could tell she was not too pleased at this. She came and came and sat down, but then I think she was kind of annoyed by this, maybe a little bit jealous, you know. But anyways, yeah, I always remember that, you know, seeing him. It was great, wonderful. Let me just pause for a sec. Okay, I paused because this stupid webcam of mine only records for 15 minutes at a time, and I don't want it to run out on me because I have a lot to say about this film. Okay, so yeah, he started out as like an editor for the university newspaper. He was like, this guy was a born writer, an incredible writer. He was the editor at like in his 20s, which was, you know, probably unprecedented. Usually editors are much older. This guy was a star. I mean, he took control of the paper, ran it. You know, he was just born to do this. And he ended up getting the job as the film critic at the Chicago Sun-Times, because he had just he had been working there part-time, not as a film critic, just as like some columnist or a regular writer, and the film critic who had been there had left or retired, so he was offered the job, and he just took it, and that's how he became this world-famous, internationally celebrated, most famous film critic in the world. And yeah, so this guy, I mean, his love of film was just so, it was his life, you know, and his life's work. And there were so many great scenes in this film. Like, there were a few clips from films. Like, I remember there's a clip from a Bergman film, Raging Bull, Apocalypse Now, just various classic films. And, you know, they were talking a little bit about, you know, I guess various reviews and stuff like that. And then there were, you know, some directors. Of course, he had like really launched a lot of these people's careers. And one director in particular who I really have become a fan of, who he championed early on, is a guy named Ramin Barani. This guy makes incredible films. If you have not seen anything by him, he's done a movie called Man Push Cart. God, it's going to escape me right now, but he's done about 3 or 4 just stellar films. And Roger went to see his first film, which was Man Push Cart, at Cannes, and championed him from that day on. And at one point, Barani said he was ready to give up film because, you know, he just really wasn't getting anywhere in his career, and Roger encouraged him to keep going. And he actually there was a great story, he even gifted him with this incredible thing. Actress Laura Dern had sent Roger and Chaz a letter thanking them for something they had done or something they had said or whatever. And she had also sent along this gift, a puzzle box, which had been gifted from Alfred Hitchcock to Marilyn Monroe, and somehow ended up in her hands. Somebody had gifted it to her. And so he gave this puzzle box to Barani, and at first Barani said, no, I can't accept this. This is just too special a gift. I can't take this. And Ebert insisted and said, no, you have to take this and give it to somebody else later on. So now Barani has this incredible piece of movie history memorabilia from Roger Ebert. So yeah, he's one director whose career he really championed. And then there was Errol Morris, who's another documentarian. Roger championed his film, his first film, which was a movie called Gates of Heaven, which is awesome. It's a documentary about a pet cemetery. It's hilarious and just it's just so great. You have to see it. Anyway, Errol Morris has gone. I think he won an Oscar. He won an Oscar for documentary. He's gone on to make many celebrated documentaries. And he said in the film, if it hadn't been for Ebert and Siskel reviewing his movies and talking about his movies, that he would not be where he is today. Scorsese, of course, the legendary director. He said he was really down and out at one point in his career. And in the 80s, he'd gotten hooked on cocaine, and his third marriage had broken up, and he was really in the dumps about his career. And Siskel and Ebert had told him they wanted to pay tribute to him at a Toronto International Film Festival that year, whichever year it was, sometime in the 80s. And he said that completely revived his career, got him making movies again because of those two and that tribute to him. Who else? Werner Herzog, of course, was another director who was really dear friends with Roger Ebert, because of course Ebert loved his films. Herzog called him the soldier of cinema, which I love. And he dedicated his documentary Encounters at the End of the World to Roger Ebert. He'd never dedicated a film to anybody before, but he dedicated it to him. And it's a beautiful film. I've seen that as well. Highly recommend that. It's gorgeous movie. And yeah, he was talking about how it was filmed in Antarctica, and he was talking about how he went to this one end of the world and bowed to him from that end of the world and dedicated his movie to him. So it was really beautiful. How beautiful is that, you know? You didn't find too many people who had bad things to say about Roger Ebert. Everybody liked the guy. How could you not? You know, he was extremely likable. You know, they said he could be a little bit diva-ish at times. The relationship between Siskel and Ebert. If you've seen the show, if you saw the show, you know that very often they had squabbles. They disagreed very vehemently about a lot of films, and they had a real rivalry. Because Siskel worked for the Tribune, which was kind of the upper crust Chicago paper, and Chicago Sun-Times that Ebert worked for was more kind of the working class paper. So there was that dichotomy between them. But also, I mean, they were very different physically, right? Siskel was this very tall, thin, sort of athletic looking guy, kind of sophisticated, and Ebert was this kind of short, you know, big, kind of portly guy. Extreme, you know, physically different, and personality-wise, they were also very different. They were both extremely intellectual, extremely intelligent men, but they had a completely different style. And there was a lot of funny scenes in the movie about outtakes for, like, when they were filming intros to whatever film they were going to preview on the show, like on their film review on Siskel and Ebert at the movies. You know, they'd be doing these outtakes over and over, and they'd be sniping at each other and making cracks at each other. It was pretty funny. And interesting thing about Gene Siskel that I didn't know, early on he became, for some reason, Hugh Hefner took a real interest in him, or they became all buddy-buddy or something. And so he was really living the high life with Hugh Hefner at the Playboy Mansion and hanging out with all the bunnies and stuff. So he must have had quite the lifestyle going on back then. This was before he was a film critic, I think. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, there was a lot of, like, you know, hilarious footage and photos of him back in the day. He's got this real big handlebar porn star mustache and everything. It was really funny. And as you'll also know, if you know Siskel and Ebert, Gene Siskel, actually, he died of cancer at the age of 53 only. In 1998, I believe, or 99, he had brain cancer. It was terminal when he was diagnosed, and he didn't tell anybody except a few members of his immediate family. And so he didn't even tell Roger. So when he found out about it, he was very hurt about it. You know, but, you know, Gene Siskel was this very private guy, and I guess he thought he didn't want everybody knowing that he was going through this, and didn't want everybody to see him, I guess, going through this. So they were saying that they didn't think it was he didn't mean it as a personal offense. It was just the way he was. And Roger Ebert was one of the pallbearers at his funeral and wrote a really beautiful obituary for him in the paper, talking about what a great friend he was. Even though they had all these, rivalries and disagreements and stuff like that, they had this incredible bond together, a very, very special bond as film critics. And he talked about having this very, very special dinner with him one night in Boston at some film festival. And he'd always remember this dinner that they had, where they had this great conversation. So, they had a lot of this dissent, at times, but deep down, I think they really had a great respect for each other. And that was a really, really beautiful story from the film. So, I could go on and tell you story after story after story. Oh yeah, one thing I also want to mention that's very important about this film is that a very important factor about Ebert's life was this love story between him and Chaz, the woman that he married, who was a black woman. And they got married when he was 50. He didn't meet her until, midlife. And he called her the love of his life. And they had an incredibly, incredibly beautiful, close relationship. And, she had grown kids and who had kids of their own. So he had grandkids, step grandkids, and they immediately accepted him into her family. And it was just a really, really beautiful relationship. And a big part of this movie shows that, that interaction between the two of them, because she's with him in the hospital a lot and talking about him and what he went through with his illness and everything. So it's really, really, really touching and beautiful. And so much about this movie was touching and beautiful, and I can't recommend it highly enough. This was a fantastic film. Really, really, really great tribute to him. If you love movies, if you loved Roger Ebert, loved Siskel and Ebert, loved that show, you will love this movie, definitely. And I definitely, definitely recommend it. 2 thumbs up. Yay, 2 thumbs up. So go see it. You won't regret it. It was awesome. Okay, see you later. Thank you for watching. Bye.